Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next installment of the Butte County Library REACH program and for personal finance. And so today we're going to be talking about how to communicate and teach kids about money. And so just as kind of some background, my name is Jacob Arbogast. I am the director of the Center for Excellence in Finance and the Financial Wellness Clinic at Chico State. And what we do is work with people on financial literacy topics, spanning everything you can think of about finance, from personal finance and budgeting to retirement planning, tax help, all kinds of different topics. And so we're going to talk a little bit about, outside of the adults that we generally work with, how might we, communicate or teach kids how to have good money habits and how to kind of establish those behaviors early on so that they continue with them throughout life. So let's get started. So this is part of the Butte County Library REACH program, which is a county-wide initiative to help bring all kinds of different economic empowerment topics to our community. And so my focus is on the personal finance aspect and financial literacy, but there's also services related to job searching and small business growth and all kinds of different economic empowerment topics. And so I highly encourage everyone to check out the Butte County Library website, which you can see here, and you can see the REACH program and see all the different services that we offer. We record all of our presentations so that you can go watch them later and pause and rewind and review any information that you want. And so if you're not able to make it to a live meeting, you can absolutely go back and watch recordings. So let's get into it. So talking with kids about money. So of course, as parents, I'm assuming that most of the people watching this are going to be parents or guardians, sometimes grandparents. But generally, we're all thinking about our kids or the children in our lives who we want them to be good with money. And I put that in quotes because good with money means something different to different people. And so maybe what I think is good with money is different than what you think. And so I'm not really here to, there's some things that are universal, right? But for the most part, I'm not here to instill what are my values onto anybody. I really am looking to share some thoughts about how to communicate more effectively and how to instill whatever your values are with your children. And so, or your grandkids, or your whoever that you are guardian of. And so whatever that may look like to you, that's okay. I'm not here to judge or to say that you have to do one thing or another. These are all just, thoughts and ideas that you might take to your family. So, for example, you may have heard of Dave Ramsey. He's a well-known personal finance. He has a radio show and they record it. I know he has a YouTube channel and he's all kinds of different things, many books that he's written. He's famous for the Total Money Makeover book. And so he is very well known in the finance world, personal finance world, as being like the anti-debt guy, right? He's so against debt. He doesn't want anybody to have credit cards or mortgage or car loan or any of those kinds of things if they can help it. And so his focus is how do we get people out of debt so that debt isn't controlling their lives. And that's totally great. That's absolutely fine for a lot of people to be very anti-debt and find a way to get out of debt and never get back into it so that you can not have that hanging over your head. But that's not what everybody believes, right? And I know there are people out there who say, you know what, debt is a tool that people can use to become more wealthy in the future if they use it appropriately. And if that's your philosophy, great. One way or the other is fine. I'm going to talk about, using debt a little bit towards the end here. So, if that's not an area that you want to hear about, you don't have to listen to me on that topic. And so I just want to be really clear that, everyone's going to have different ideas. And that's just one example. There's all kinds of different things that, maybe for religious reasons or maybe for just personal life experience reasons, we have different ideas about money. And so whatever your ideas are just fine. So approaching, kids, and kids is a broad range, right? Children, anyone under 18, and approaching, children to talk about good money habits and how we're going to interact with money as we grow. It's going to be different for every age, right? I have a 3-year-old son, for example, and right now he and I are working on counting. He can count to about 20 just fine, but if we're going to count beyond 20, he needs a little bit of help. And but he's 3 years old, and so we have a piggy bank for him. He loves coins. And so he likes just to look at them. I mean, they're shiny objects, right? So 3-year-olds is definitely going to be excited about that. But, we are at this age, there's not really, I can't tell him, we have to save for the future. He's not going to understand that. And so what we're just doing right now is keeping it very basic and just counting and naming the coins, right? He knows that a penny is kind of the brownish color one where all the rest of them are silver. And so, and then by size, right? Quarters are larger than nickels and dimes. And so we're just kind of knowing the names and maybe learning a little bit of delayed gratification, saying, you know what, maybe we don't get that right now, and maybe you can ask for it for your birthday, and maybe you have to wait a little while before you get what you want, right? Those are things that a 3-year-old has some trouble learning early on, right? But over time, they're going to develop those skills a little more. And so that's something that I'm working on with my 3-year-old. A 5-year-old, for the other, to kind of expand on that a little bit, a few years later, there's a lot of growth that happens in the first 5 years of life, right? So the difference between a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old is pretty significant. But they understand that there's an exchange happening. You can pay dollars to receive something, right? So they can buy candy, they can do that. And so those are some things that you might, focus your attention on, is how do we interact with money as a society? We all have dollars, or maybe a debit or credit card or some other type of medium of exchange that we use interacting with stores or receiving goods or services, whatever that is. And we're approaching that with a 5-year-old. We're approaching that from, hey, we have some things that we can exchange for other things that we want. And some things we want more than others. And we may have to make a decision. If we are going to exchange our dollars for candy, then we no longer have those dollars to exchange for something like a movie. And so we might want to just have a little bit of a conversation about, how much we spend on certain things. And of course, the 5-year-old's not going to understand things like, hey, we have these bills we have to pay next week, so we can't, that's too much for a 5-year-old. So we just have to, slowly take steps as they grow and think about the context of where they are developmentally. Moving on, preteens, right? So now we have, maybe we have a 11, 12-year-old, or maybe even a 10-year-old. They know about money. They have the understanding that we can, spend money and we can save money, and some things cost a lot more than others, right? So at this age now, we're saying, hey, if we want to buy that expensive thing, we might need to save for it, right? And so preteens are a little bit more mature, and they can set aside funds for a future transaction that they're expecting or wanting to have, but they might still not have the same attention span that an adult would, right? And so they might get fed up trying to save up for a whole year. That may not be within the expectations of a preteen. They might say, listen, if it's not going to happen in 2 months, that's like an eternity for a 10-year-old, right? And so maybe we set our goals a little bit lower, so that they're not trying to save up for 3 years for some big purchase or something. A few months might be good. And then going the next step, teenagers are getting pretty close to adulthood here, right? If we're 15, 16, 17-year-old, then we can think about bills. We can think about prioritizing expenses. We can think about, setting aside some funds for expenses that will come up later. And they can be a little more intentional about their transactions, right? And you might actually ask your teenager to help contribute to the household expenses. That's a common thing that a lot of people do. You may pay part of their phone bill. If they're a driver, maybe a 16, 17-year-old, and they're driving, they may contribute to some of the car insurance. Now, not everybody has the ability to do that. Of course, not every teenager has an income. And so sometimes parents are supporting their teen, but if you have that ability, that might be something you may consider too. And so just my main focus here is, we need to come to their place, whatever their developmental phase is. And this is a general outline. Every child is going to be different, right? The developmental place where my 3-year-old is not necessarily the same developmental place that another 3-year-old is, right? Everyone's going to mature at different paces. And so you might know your children and say, hey, my kid is preteen, but really mature for his age. And I think maybe I can kind of step forward a couple places here. And that's absolutely fine. You have to, you know your children and you know how they interact with the world. And so you can decide along this scale, what point they're at and meet them there. So one of the things that can help children to understand transactions and money and this in the finance world, in like academic finance world, we talk about a store of value and an exchange, a medium of exchange, and that's what money is. That's what money represents. And it means that we can set aside something that doesn't expire, it doesn't go bad. That's cash, right? Cash generally, as long as you keep it dry and not on fire, it's pretty much going to be fine sitting in a safe or sitting in a bank or something like that. And so we want our kids to be able to have an interaction with money in a healthy way, right? And so one way to help younger kids, even doesn't, as long as they're old enough and mature enough to understand, it doesn't really matter at what point we put that term younger. It's kind of relative to every kid. But when they're at a younger age, we might have them, they might have an opportunity to earn an income, and that might not be working, right? Of course, we don't want kids working at a factory, but I'm thinking chores, right? They do something at home, or they do some, help around the house, and you might pay an allowance. That's time tested. That's been a thing for as long as I've been around. I mean, for the 50s, there was kids doing chores. So that's something you can do with your kids as well. And the chores could be tailored to their age, right? You get a little bit more complex as they get older, cleaning up their toys if they're very young, or taking out the trash if they're a little bit older than that, or cleaning out the gutters or mowing the lawn if they're even older than that, right? And it depends on your kid and their ability. But you might also scale up their income, their pay, how much you pay them for chores, depending on where they are along that scale and what's relevant to them, right? My 3-year-old would be happy to receive a handful of pennies because he doesn't know the difference in value so much right now. But a 5-year-old might understand that a penny is worth 1 while a quarter is worth 25. And so they may want to know the overall total sum of value. And then a preteen or a teenager absolutely is going to know the difference between $20 and $30, right? And so you might change what that chore compensation looks like depending on their age and their maturity. One thing I do want to communicate, though, is with younger kids, if we're going to help set up those good money habits and kind of the philosophy about money and understanding, in their interaction with money, you might ask them, hey, now that we have this, now that you've received this income for your chores or for whatever it is, what do we do with it? And let them, especially if they're really young, where the total dollar value isn't something that really anyone needs to worry about, right? They have $3 or $4 and it maybe is in change. And so you say, hey, what should we do with this money? A 5-year-old might say, hey, let's go buy candy, or let's buy a new game, or let's save it, or let's share it. Those are all things that they might think of, but you want them to reach that conclusion. You may suggest some ideas. And depending on your personal values, if you want to, contribute to a charity, or you want to save more, or whatever that may be, you may, suggest some ideas to help them get thinking about it, right? We could buy some candy, or we could set aside some of it to buy candy and the rest of it to give to a cause that we support, or to help someone in need. And you might instill those values around money with a younger kid. As they get older, and hopefully as you've been doing this throughout their growth, they kind of start to learn about behaviors that they can take with their money to say, you know what, I really do get a good feeling about supporting this cause that I care about. It could be like a church thing. It could be like a nonprofit group in the community. It could be whatever is important to you and to them. But they might say, you know what, I really do like, every Saturday we go down to this location and help out the people in need. And I want to continue doing that and using the money that I'm making to, set aside some of that for that cause. And so as long as you're communicating that is an option, and let them decide for themselves, you don't want to force ideas on them, but you want to suggest and see if they'll maybe think about it. And the most that I would get with my kids as they get older is saying, how about we try this and see what we think? And if we don't like it, maybe we don't do it that way next time. And you can continue to kind of try different things, saving more, spending more, sharing more, giving more, whatever it is, and try, different things every so often to see what is, the most fun for them. Another thing to think about is, if you have a teenager, maybe they want to get a part-time job. And so if they're maybe 16, 17, something like that, then they can go work after school. That was something that I did when I was a teen. I worked after school in high school and before school in high school. And I worked quite a bit in high school in order to have an income and to use that money for things that I cared about, right? When I was growing up, my parents, they supported me for a long time. And then as I got older, they said, hey, listen, we're going to maybe not contribute as much to your life now that you have a job and you can, like, the things that I want to do, right? If I wanted a car when I was a teenager, if I wanted to have a car, I had to pay for it, right? My parents sort of said, we'll take you to school and back if you need it, but other than that, you're on your own, right? You want to go do other things, you have to pay for it. And so I got a job, and at that point I had established already decent money habits, maybe not good money habits, but decent enough. And so I do remember I spent a lot of time at malls as a teenager, but probably more than I should have. But those are the kinds of things that, as kids get older, they might, have other opportunities. I always encourage an entrepreneurial spirit, especially with kids and when the stakes are low. So if you have a kid who doesn't, they're obviously not like paying a mortgage, they're not supporting their family, right? That's you as the parent, that's your role to support the family. And if the kids don't have, high stakes, they can try, let's try doing something new and be a little innovative about it. And if it fails, no big deal, because they're kids, they have their whole life ahead of them to try something else new. And so let them take those supervised, safe risks as a kid, and you be there as their parent or the guardian or grandparent or whoever, but be there to say, hey, I will bail you out if you need it, but let them take that risk and say, so kids are going to ask, why do you want me to get a job, or why do you want me to do more chores, or and so one of the ways to approach that conversation when a kid says, why do you want me to clean up after myself? Why can't I just leave it? Why do I have to clean my room? Why do I have to make my bed? I'm just going to get back in it, right? This is a common thing that kids talk about or kids ask about. And so an approach to that conversation would be about goal setting, right? Why do we care about having money? Why do we care about keeping things clean? Why do we care about anything in our lives? Is because we might have a goal that we're trying to accomplish, right? And so why do we care about having money? Maybe we want to acquire something that's important to us. It could be, something that is fun, or it could be something that we need, like food, or it could be like a game, or it could be a movie, or for younger kids, it could be I don't know, candy. I'm going to keep using the candy example because that's what I think kids want, but I don't know. So it could be that they want to acquire something. Or our goal could be that we want to support a cause, right? We want to donate to a charity, to a church, to an organization of some kind. And so that might be another goal that we have. Or we want security, right? Something that's important to us is I want to have a home where I'm not at risk of losing that home. I want to have a car so that I can get to and from places that I need to get to. I want to have a savings cushion in case an emergency happens. Those are all goals that people have, right? Kids might not worry about an emergency fund as much as an adult would, but the idea is that we have some goal in mind, and that's what the money is supposed to be for. Regardless of what that goal is, at different developmental stages through our lives, we're going to have different goals. They're generally going to be a lot more self-centered when we're young, and get a little more outward focused as we get older and we realize our role in society, right? And so all of those are good reasons to plan and set goals. And so if you're going to talk to your kid about money and what to do with that savings once they've earned an income, we're going to talk goal setting. And I always recommend setting some goals, whether you're an adult or a kid. It doesn't matter. At any point in your life, have some goals in mind of what you want to accomplish. And so I usually use this outline. It's called SMART goals. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And so each of those pieces tells you how to structure your goal in a way where it can be the most useful to you. And so if you're setting a specific goal, right? A specific goal is one where you can say, here is what I want to accomplish. And there should be no vague or uncertain piece of it where you aren't sure, oh, did I actually do that or not? Right? So words that I try to stay away from when I'm looking for a specific goal is words like more or less. Those aren't very specific, right? What constitutes more? So if my goal is to save more money, that's not a very specific goal, because what's more money? $1? That's not very helpful. But if I say I want to have this balance in my savings account on this specific date, that's a very specific goal, right? I want $1,000 in my emergency fund by the end of next month. That's about as specific of a goal as you can have. And so that's one piece of it. The next piece, the M of SMART, is measurable. And your goal should have something that can be measured. Now, that's not always going to be a dollar value, but it usually is. A lot of people think of, especially if we're talking about money and how do we measure money, we say this many dollars, this many cents, but it doesn't have to be. A measurement can be a lot of different things. It can be how many times you did something. So how many times I paid into my retirement account. For an adult, maybe that might be a measurable. I contributed $100 a month for 6 months into my IRA. That's a measurable goal. Did I do it for the 6 months? Or yes or no is a way to measure true or false. Those are measurable things. And so did I accomplish my goal? I work with students a lot, and a lot of them have goals to get an internship or to get a job. And so a measurable aspect to that is it could be how many internships did I apply to, or yes, no, did I get the internship I wanted? Sometimes students that I work with have a specific internship in mind. They want to go work at Google, or they want to go work at Amazon, or whatever that is. And so they say, did I get that job or did I not? Yes, no, that's measurable. Achievable means it really needs to be possible. So for me, my go-to example here is if my goal is becoming a billionaire, for me, that is not achievable. That's not something I'm ever going to have in my life. I've kind of set my sights. I know that that's not something, and I'm okay with that, right? I'm okay knowing that I will not ever become a billionaire. I hope to one day be like a multimillionaire. That would be great, but a billionaire is not really in my cards. And so whatever our goal is, it needs to be achievable, and that's going to be 100% dependent on you and your life. For some people, a stretch goal or a hard goal to achieve might be owning a home. For other people, that might not be a difficult thing at all, right? And it depends on where you are in life. For kids, because this is in the context of kids, achievable might be depending on their age and how much they earn in like chores, or if they have a job, how much they earn from work. A lot of kids might think, hey, I want to buy a PlayStation 5. That's going to be an example I'm going to use in a second. That may or may not be achievable for every child, right? If they're 7 years old and they make $10 a week worth of chores, it's going to take a very long time to save up for a PlayStation 5. That's a thing that a kid would love to have. But if you sit down and say, hey, if we look at how much money we need to pay for this, it's going to take you like a year or more to pay for it, to be able to save up for that. And that may or may not be achievable for a 7-year-old. They don't want to sit and wait for a whole year, right? And so we just want to look at our goal and say, at what point, in what context here is this achievable for this person? Relevant is the next step. They are, and that is my goal relevant to my life? Is it something that is important to me? Does it matter to me? Or am I looking for something out of my life that has some connection to this goal I'm setting? Again, I work with students a lot, so I always have like educational related examples. But if my goal is, hey, I think I want to get a PhD, I want to go get a doctoral degree in a specific field, that's my goal. I can make it specific. Like I want it to be, by this date, I want to have been enrolled in a PhD program, and that's measurable because I gave it a specific date. And is it achievable for me? Sure, I have the education needed to pursue a PhD, but is it relevant to me? Well, I don't really want to be a college professor. So maybe a PhD isn't really that relevant, right? A lot of times PhDs you get one with the intention of becoming a professor, different than like an MD, a doctoral degree, or a JD, a law degree, where you would, actually go into a profession related to that thing. PhD is more for like college professors. And if you don't want to be a college professor, then getting a PhD is not a really relevant goal. But you can imagine in your own life, things that you may like have thought, oh, I want to do that. But then upon further introspection, you say, you know what, that's not really going to help me in any other area of my life other than I thought it would be cool to do. So keep our goals relevant, be a little bit strategic about it, maybe. The last piece here, the T of SMART, is time bound. And so I always recommend to have an end date by all of the other pieces of here. The S, M, A, and R all come together by a certain date. And that way, as you get closer to that date, you can see if you're on track. And so if your goal is to save more money, maybe you be specific about it, you save $1,000 in your emergency fund by the end of next month. You say, okay, end of next month is my time bound, right? That is my end date. And if I get 1 or 2 weeks into it, and I haven't put any money into my savings account, then I know that I'm kind of falling behind my time end date there. And so I need to say, you know what? I either need to move my time, I need to say, you know what, give me 3 months to save up for it instead, or I need to double my efforts on the next 2 weeks because I need to make up for the 2 weeks that I didn't do my goal. So time bound really helps with the context of saying, how close am I to my end date and how much have I done so far? Am I on track? If I'm halfway to my end date, but I'm not halfway to my savings goal, then I might want to kick it up a notch. Or if I'm more than halfway to my savings goal by the time I reach my halfway to my end date, I might say, you know what, I can calm down a little bit on my intensity here, or I can up my goal and maybe get a more aggressive goal even. And it really depends on your life and your context and what makes sense to you. But you can either dial it back a little bit, ramp it up a little more, however that works. So I think you should try this with your kids. So if your child is old enough to set goals, my 3-year-old, he's not going to understand the ideas about a SMART goal, right? We're working on recognizing those letters just alone, let alone spelling the word SMART, right? But if your child is old enough to understand the idea of goal setting, work with them and say, hey, what if we set a goal, right? Going through the acronym here, let's say, okay, maybe you have a preteen or a younger teenager, maybe, between 10 to 15 years old or so. And they might want to have a PlayStation 5. All their friends have PlayStation 5s. Mom, dad, why can't I have a PlayStation 5 if everybody else is doing it, right? The classic child's argument. Well, you say, listen, if that's your goal to buy a PlayStation 5, let's set this up. Let's figure out how we can achieve that goal. So specific, to own a PlayStation 5. Excellent. That's a specific goal. Because you can say, do I have one or do I not, right? Measuring. Well, how much does a PlayStation 5 cost? I had to go look this up because I wasn't sure. There's a digital edition, which is apparently the cheaper version of a PlayStation 5 right now that you can get for $400. Okay, great. So if I'm within the context of a child's budget, I'm thinking $400 is pretty pricey, right? That's kind of expensive for a kid. And so you need to say, hey, listen, son or daughter or child, I need to or you need to understand that if you're going to attempt to save up for this, it's going to take some time. So is this achievable? That takes us into the A. Well, if you do all your chores, and let's say I had to come up with a number, so $35 a week for chores, that may be a lot or a little depending on your family and your lifestyle. But if that's contextually okay with your family, then you say, if you can do all your chores every week and you make your allowance, and maybe you have to have certain grades, or you maybe have to have something else involved in that. But if you do 12 weeks at $35 a week, then you're going to be right at, I think it comes out to $420. And so you say, okay, that's doable. That would mean you work the entire summer to save up for this thing you want. And that's a pretty classic thing with kids, right? You work all summer long to save up for the new bike or the new game or the new whatever. And that could totally work. And so if $35 a week is too much, then you may need to change your idea a little bit and say, hey, you know what? So you work the entire summer and you still wouldn't have enough for this. Maybe we want to change our goal a little bit. Maybe a PlayStation 5 really is in the cards right now. Maybe the family can't afford that. That's okay. If that's where you are right now, then that's okay. You just have to change your idea and your goal and say, maybe instead of buying a PlayStation 5, we buy a different gaming console that is not as expensive, or a different thing entirely, or we save up for some other goal. Maybe a trip to the beach, or a trip to somewhere where it's not necessarily as expensive. It just is the travel, to that place, or a little staycation, mini, staycation kind of thing, something like that. The relevant piece, of course, for kids, they love games. They're going to want to, if you say, hey, should we get a PlayStation 5? Most kids are going to say, yeah, absolutely, whether or not that's actually a good idea. And so, of course, it'll be relevant to the kid, but you might encourage them to think about other relevant goals as well and say, you know what, this is something that's interesting to you and that's exciting for you, and I understand that, but we also might think about saving for some other goal, or that new bike, or you want to play on the baseball team, and that means we need to buy a new uniform or new cleats or something like that. And so these are these other costs that go into this that you might want to consider, and weighing those priorities. Depending on the age of your child, priorities are going to take a different approach here. My 3-year-old has a hard time dealing with what are priorities. Everything's a priority to him. If it's on the front of his mind, it's the priority right then. He doesn't have the understanding to say, you know what, this thing in the future is more important to me than this other thing right now. He's not at that place yet, but a 10-year-old absolutely could think about that. And then time bound. So in this case, we said, well, if they're going to work all summer to save up for this goal, time bound means by the end of summer, and depending on what school you're in, that may or may not be August, but I'm going to say, somewhere around August, that might be the end of summer vacation for a kid. And so that's the time, the ending piece. And so as we get a little bit through June, July, we might say, hey, are we on track to meet our August deadline? And then talk to the kid and say, hey, looking at your goal here, you're maybe off track a little bit. How are we going to make up the difference? What are we going to do? And get them thinking about it, right? And that's the healthy relationship with goal setting and money, and saying, you know what, I planned for this, and it didn't work out the way I want, so I need to adjust my ideals a little bit here, and maybe adjust my goals or adjust my effort in some way or another. A great idea once you've set up this goal is to have a goal chart. Kids can be visual. They need a constant reminder and idea of what's going on. So there's so much going on in their lives, and just like with my 3-year-old, but really with any child, they have a lot going on in their head, and they think about all the different things all the time. And so they need some consistent reminder. And so a goal chart is a great way to have that reminder, especially, visible, really in your face at home. And it's going to help your child kind of stick with it. And if they see that goal progression happening over time. So I use this little picture of a thermometer, but you might do something different, especially, considering the context of this gaming system. You might have a picture of like a controller for a PlayStation controller, and that fills up with color. Or it's okay if you don't know much about PlayStations, but they have a lot of buttons on their controllers. And so maybe you get a sticker on each button, and once you fill up all the different buttons, that means you've achieved your goal. Or there's all kinds of different fun, creative ways you can make this kind of reinforce the idea of, hey, we need to take it in steps. We don't just go from 0 to 100. We have to go a little bit at a time. And so a goal chart is a great way to do that. Make it really visible. You can put it at our household. There's an area in our like dining room area where I could hang a chart so that like my son could see it. He's not at this point yet in his developmental place, but in a couple of years he absolutely will be. And so you might hang it there, or you might hang it in their room or on their door or something like that, where they'll see it every day and they'll say, okay, it's a reminder that I'm at this point, right? I'm at this point on my goal chart, and as I, maybe by the end of tomorrow or the end of the next day, I'll be at the next line, and I know that if I just keep going, I can see it progressing over time, and it's a good reinforcement of those ideas. So definitely make it visible. And then I also highly encourage you as the parent or guardian to really give some positive reinforcement. There's a lot of psychological research about how people respond to different inputs. And you've probably heard of the idea of like the carrot and the stick. Well, most research in psychology, there's a subset of finance called behavioral finance, or it's like a psychology aspect of how people interact with money and goal setting and economics and those kinds of things. And most of the research in this area says that people respond much more effectively and much more long-term changes to positive reinforcement than they do negative. So punishing someone for doing wrong is not as effective as celebrating and showing pride and excitement about a success. If you can show them, especially coming from a parent's perspective or a grandparent or any guardian, to a kid is going to be happy if you are celebrating their successes with them. So positive reinforcement is great, as they make, even if it's not the full, like you don't have to wait until the entire goal is met for you to celebrate. Each step can be a celebration. Say, yeah, we've done it. Awesome. High five. Good job. Let's keep it going. And they're going to be excited that you're excited, and you can keep reinforcing those ideas that this delayed gratification and working towards a long-term goal comes with some, pride and some, satisfaction in having done something that you put your mind to. And it takes a lot of that reinforcement from parents. And let me tell you, it's gonna reinforce with your child that, that is something that I can strive for, and that's gonna stick with them for the rest of their life. So another option is maybe, your child isn't ready to have their own individual goal yet. My son maybe can help support a family goal. He's at that place that we might do something like that, and that makes a little more sense for us. It depends on their developmental space. It doesn't really matter how old your child is. It depends on where they are maturity level. But a family goal is a great way to get them involved, maybe early on before they set their own goals, so that they can get an experience with goal setting and working towards something. And if we have a family goal to save up for a vacation, right, that would be a great way for a kid to help out. And you say, how can a kid help out saving for a family vacation? And of course, they're not going to go get a job and contribute to the savings account, but they might help with, hey, let's turn the lights off so we can save some more money, so we can put a little bit more in that savings. Or, hey, let's, whatever it is, there's all kinds of different ways that kids can help to contribute to the household. Or if they have chores, if they're working on chores or something, they say, hey, do you want to help take some of your chore earnings and put that towards our vacation fund so that we can go to Disneyland, for example, or wherever it is that you want to go. So that might work too. Family goal is a great way to get kids involved. And I would say the younger the child is, or the less maturity they have, the shorter the time span needs to be, right? They're not going to wait a really long time from their perspective. From us as adults, we say a year may or may not be a long time for us, but for a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old, a year is essentially forever. And they don't understand. It's the way I've always heard it is it's about like a percentage of your life, right? When you're 7 years old, 1 year is 1/7 of or when you're 5 years old, 1 year is 20% of your entire life. If you're 50 years old, 1 year is 2% of your entire life. So you kind of have to think about it in a contextual way. Like that. And so if you are, let's say a family goal is to get a new board game that we can play, on family game night. And so we can save up for a new board game, and that might not take very long to save up for, right? And so we can do that over the course of 2 weeks. And that's a perfect context for a 5-year-old to say, hey, can we save up for 2 weeks to get this new board game that we can play together? That's a great family goal. A 5-year-old can help contribute to that. That's getting them set up for, good habits with savings and goal setting and planning for the future early on. And you can continue that and just expand it over time. As kids get older, you might set a family goal. A teenager might, thinking of at least my teenager years, is a teenager might not be super excited to do things with the family, but there might be something that you can set within, your parameters of your family that makes sense. Can they do some chores and contribute to a vacation or some new thing at the house, some maybe activity that you do as a family that maybe they are excited about, whatever that may be. I think when I was a kid, if me and my dad and my mom had saved up to go to like a sporting event, like a football game, I would have been all over that. But that was me as a kid, right? That's not every kid. Everybody's going to be different. So it depends on what it is for your family, but whatever works for you, you do it that way. But no matter what it is, again, I'm going to fall back on that. Have the child be involved. Celebrate with them, and when they contribute, no matter how minor of a contribution it is, celebrate that success, celebrate that help, and let them know, hey, you were a big factor in making sure that we were able to do this thing that we wanted to do, and I appreciate your commitment and your contribution to our success. That's obviously very adult language, but phrase it in a way that makes sense for a child so that they can feel like they've really had a contribution and that they've done something to help, and they can be proud of it. If they're experiencing pride and you're telling them that you celebrate their help and that you're happy about it and you're proud of them, they're going to have that feeling carry with them throughout their entire life. And you're going to always think back at, even if it's subconscious, they might not actively say, oh, I remember that time when I was 7, but they might, in the back of their mind, associate good feelings with saving and accomplishing a goal. And that's where we want to make those internal connections, associating good feelings with achieving a goal that we've worked for over a long time, right? So in the real world, there's some things that we have to interact with as well, right? And so we can, okay, we set some goals, we have some ideas, we know what's important to us, we're like working on building up these ideas with our kids. And then we hit the wall of real world where things are done on Venmo and debit cards and like, we're trying to associate these, saving and spending and giving and all these different things, mentally. And that's really hard to do when money has gone to a point in our society where it's like just numbers on a screen, right? How many zeros are after the decimal or after the comma on my website, on my bank? Well, that's really hard to add a psychological aspect to it. Back when everything was done in cash, you would have, cash in hand, and you say, okay, well, if I take this many dollars out of my hand and spend them, I no longer have them. I can feel and see, and I weigh the difference in my hand. I know that I've spent money on something. And so now when everything is just, my debit card taps on everything, right? I don't even have to swipe or insert a chip. I can just tap it on stuff and I'm paid and I'm gone. I don't have there's no tangible difference. Like if I spent $10,000 on my card and I just tapped it, it's the same if I spent $1 and there's no feeling there. So that's a little bit harder to deal with, especially for kids, because they're already not confident in their interaction with cash or with money in any way. And so having them immediately step into this digital, robotic experience is not very helpful. So I usually say, if you have younger kids, start off, even though it's maybe not as convenient in the real world right now, start off with actual money and make it visible. And so this picture here of these jars is a great way to do that. You can see the money in there. You can see as that jar fills up. This can be on their dresser in their bedroom, and it's just visible. They don't ever have to open it or see it if they don't want to, or take it out if they don't want to, but they can see that their goals are growing and getting closer over time. And if they're labeled like that, you can kind of see on these jars, they're labeled spend, save, share. That might be 3 categories. What do you want to spend on things that you want for yourself? What do you want to save for a future goal? And what do you want to share, maybe to give to a charity or give to a church or give to whatever it is that's important in your life? When I was a preteen and younger teen years, I worked with my grandpa. He was a general contractor, and he paid me to help him, and it was a little bit more than just holding a light, but it was basically just, he paid me so I could get some like life experience, earning money, working for money, that kind of thing. But he always said, there's a kind of a rule in our household or our family, that you're not allowed to use the power tools until you can do the job with the hand tools, right? I had to use a hammer and a screwdriver and a hand saw before I was allowed to use the Sawzall and the skill saw and the drill and all that kind of stuff. And I think the same thing is true here with money, is that you need to use the hand tools. Then once you are accomplished using cash as the hand tool, then you can use the power tools: debit cards, credit cards, savings and checking accounts, Venmo and PayPal, and any of those other things. So get them used to physical cash before doing a checking account. Although I will say my son has a checking account in his name, but he doesn't know it. I am saving money for him for his future, and that money will be available to him in his future. That's not something that everyone has the ability to do. And so at some point, once he's comfortable and good with using actual physical money, I will let him know, hey, there's this checking account in your name, and we can start planning and using that effectively as well. Once he's maybe a little bit older, if he's 8, 9, 10 years old, he'll have the kind of wherewithal to understand that there's a savings account available, that we don't really want to spend all that money. We want to plan ahead and decide what we want to use that money for, whether it's an education, right? He absolutely can choose to use that for college if he wants, but he doesn't have to. There's my wife and I have an understanding about this money and what it's for. And so we'll let him make those decisions when he's old enough to make those decisions. He's not at that age yet. So this picture here is the jars, but there's another system that I used when I was a financial planner called the envelope system. I used that for my clients, even adults. These were adult clients who had their own issues with their spending patterns and their willpower with money. And so an envelope system is another great way to do that, where you take your money and put it into envelopes, and each envelope is labeled. It's the exact same thing as the jar. I think with adults, the envelope system makes a little more sense because it's easy to store. But with kids, I think the jar system needs to be very visible, right? We're not talking so much money that we're worried about it, being robbed or something like that. We just want it to be visible, so we get that reinforcement, right? Kids tend to be very visually focused. If they have to think conceptually, it's a little bit harder. But if they can see what's happening and they can feel it and they can touch it and they can hold it, that's going to be a lot more effective. So then, okay, now let's go back. Remember, I talked about Dave Ramsey and his anti-debt stance earlier. So I don't want to not speak to the idea of using debt, right? And I understand that there's a lot of people who are not interested in teaching their kids about using debt. They're they're of the opinion and of the mindset that all debt is bad. When you're a kid, you absolutely don't want your kid going into thousands and thousands, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt or credit card debt, right? When they're 18 years old, that would absolutely be a disaster. And so I 100% am on board with you there. But I encourage you to hear me out on some thoughts. So using debt, if you're able to, of course, not everybody can. And there are some religions and some philosophies where debt is absolutely forbidden. You can't have debt at all. And if you're in that place, then okay. But if you have at least the idea that maybe there is a way that we can approach the concept of debt with kids, then let's think about it. So if you are willing to share your information, your personal information with your child, I encourage that. You absolutely can. And maybe you don't want to. Okay. And I can understand, as a parent, not wanting to tell your kid how much your house is worth and how much you owe on the mortgage or how much you owe on your car or how much credit card debt you have. Because what if they go to school and tell all their friends and their teacher, hey, mom has 7 credit cards and there's $10,000 on them or something. That could be a little embarrassing. And so I understand that. And so you don't necessarily have to share actual dollar amounts if you're not comfortable with that. But you might say, you know what, this is how we paid for this car. We borrowed money from a bank and every month we pay back a little bit of that money, and let them know, like, this car that we have, we're making payments on it every month in order to have this car because we had to borrow money. But by doing that, it lets the bank know that we are good with our money. They know, hey, this family, mom and dad, are good at paying back their debts. And you can kind of just approach the idea of a credit score, and that by paying back your debts, the bank now knows, hey, this person is reliable. And you turn it from a conversation about debt being bad to using debt to show that you are a responsible adult and that you're able to interact with the world in a successful way. And now your kids view that debt as not necessarily a bad thing, but a tool that I can use to show that, you know what, I can be responsible and I can make decisions, and I can say, maybe I tell my child, this is when they're older, this is not 3, 5, 7-year-old, this is maybe, younger teen age. You say, you know what, now that I have this loan or this debt and I'm making payments, had I gotten too large of a loan, it would show everybody that I don't know how to interact with money and I am not a responsible person. And so I have to balance that there. And you don't want to scare them, but you want them to understand that this is a powerful thing and that you might, it's possible to make a mistake, and it's possible to take on too much debt and to not be able to pay it. So you absolutely can teach them about the idea without sharing your personal details if you don't want to. I teach personal finance classes at Chico State. That's my job outside of running the financial wellness clinic. And so I show my students all the time. I show them how much I had on my car loan when I had one. It's paid off now. I show them my mortgage statement. I show them I don't have a credit card bill anymore, but I have a credit card that's paid off. And so I show them that, and I show them the interest that I paid over time. I can, and those are things that me personally am comfortable sharing. But I absolutely understand that not everyone is. And so I'm sharing this with people who aren't even related to me, but you may or may not be able or willing to share it with your children. And you can decide within your own household what makes sense to share and what doesn't. So one way to think about this is, let's think back actually to that PlayStation 5 argument. So if I was going to set up a goal to buy a PlayStation 5 or my child is going to set up a goal to buy the PlayStation 5, and we do the math and we say, you know what, even if you got all of your allowance the whole summer and you did all this work, you wouldn't have enough. You as the parent may say, you know what, I will cover some of it for you. You do all of the work to reach this goal, and I will get you to the finish line, but you have to pay me back. And that may be something that works for you. It may not be. My relationship with my father is one where that might have worked for him. I can see both ways going. He never actually did this with me, but I can see him saying, yeah, I will pay for it and you got to pay me back. And I can also see his argument saying, I'm not helping you at all. You got to do it yourself. And so depending on what age your child is, one of those may make sense and one of them may not. But let's say you tell your child, hey, listen, I know that this is a really big lift for you. You can't save $500 over the course of the summer because that's just too much for a child your age. And that's understandable. And you say, I will cover the other $100 or $200 if you can get to $200 or $300 in savings. And then that works out. And then they pay you back in the fall, if we're thinking of they save over the summer and then buy it with your help, and then throughout the fall, they may pay you back. And then you can teach them the idea of, if you don't pay your debts, the bank may repossess your car or your house, right? You get a foreclosure on a house or something. And those are really big, scary things in the real world, right? Adults don't want to deal with that. But we can give children a little sneak peek into being an adult by showing them, hey, you lost the PlayStation because you didn't pay the bill, quote unquote, on it. And so that gives them some real world experience. And then of course they can earn it back if they if they pay back up to be even, where in the real world, if your car gets repossessed, you have basically one chance to get it back with a payment. And after that, they're going to sell it. That's absolutely, too strict for a child. You don't want them to have that real world experience. You want them to have an example that isn't so risky or so dangerous to their life. And so they can kind of get, they don't have that fear of their credit score being ruined because they didn't pay their mom back, but they have a little bit of that kick in the behind to get them moving. So it is important for kids to have some interaction too. You don't want to just outright buy it for them and have them pay you over time, because then this is the same thing for the same argument that we make with home loans, mortgages, with car loans. When banks or lenders are saying, hey, you need to have some down payment, it's because you need to have contributed to some of this. Otherwise, what's to stop you from just saying, you know what, I didn't pay it, I don't care, just take it away. I got it basically free use for a little while, and now I'm over it. You don't want that. And kids won't be that argumentative or that they won't have that kind of response. But you want to have them, if this is an educational lesson for your child, you want them to have contributed some and done some work for it, and then you help them out and they see you as that reliable person that can come in and say, I will help you get to your goal, but you need to put in some work too. That's a very educational and very healthy relationship piece there. So I definitely recommend that. So you might also talk about, if you're able to put in some money now, then you would have a lower payment over time, right? So for example, $100 now and then $25 a week for 12 weeks, compared to if you put nothing in and I pay the entire amount up front, and now my child has to cover $33 a week. And you can tell them, look, the difference in how much you make in allowance every week, and whether or not you'll have some amount of money for games. If you're going to buy this console, you're going to want to buy games, right? So if you can put in 100 now and then pay me 25 a week, you maybe have another $15 available for games, or I don't know how much PlayStation games cost. That's probably unrealistic. It's probably much more expensive than $15, but you know what I mean, right? You can kind of weigh the different choices available to them and see what they think. So, okay, so just to pause and go back and kind of review here, some things to remember. So positive reinforcement is going to have a much longer lasting impact, and it's going to be much more effective than negative reinforcement. So if your kid, no matter what age they are, if they're helping to contribute to some goal, if they're going to reach some goal together, with you as a family or individually, it doesn't matter, but you need to celebrate those victories, right? No matter how small they are, if they take one step in the right direction, you say, awesome, great work, let's keep it up, let's see if we can do it again, let's make it bigger next time, or whatever it is. But it's in some way give them positive reinforcement that's going to associate good feelings and pride that perseverance piece of working through maybe something that is tough to do, especially for young kids. Saving and thinking about long-term future things is really hard to do when you have a very short attention span as a 7 or 8 year old. So reinforce those good feelings so that they have that association with saving and goal setting. Start slow. So if this is your first foray into goal setting and savings and things, make it really small goal, really short time frame. Just do some basic things and then check in pretty often, right? A week-long goal for a young kid is going to be just fine. You don't need to have years out. You don't need to save for months. You can have a goal by the end of this week. Let's do these things. That's absolutely fine. But then as they get more comfortable, as they're able to do it and it becomes less and less of a chore, quote unquote, to them, you can start expanding. You say, listen, we've been knocking out these goals every week. Let's do a 1 month goal. Let's see if we can spread it out to 1 month rather than these last 4 weeks. We've done 4 weekly goals. And that's going to help them get a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more of that long-term, kind of mindset, and being able to delay that satisfaction and that gratification and be able to save for the future. And that's going to translate into, when they're adults, retirement savings, right? That's going to be, hey, I can save for retirement, which is many decades out, right? If I'm 25 years old, graduating college, and I plan to retire at 65, that's 40 years. That's a long time off, right? And so a child isn't going to be able to understand that. But if they've been working on extending their goals throughout their childhood, by the time they reach adulthood, they're going to say, you know what, I'm comfortable with long-term goals now because I've done it so much. Kids learn best when they feel safe, but are able to learn by doing, right? They're able to learn by doing. They're able to take small risks where there's not an actual physical risk, but they're able to interact with the world around them firsthand, do things, touch things, feel things, right? All that kind of stuff. So if you are there to be their kind of backstop to say, listen, as your parent, I'm going to make sure you don't get hurt. I'm going to make sure that nothing here is going to be, long-term detriment to your life, but I want you to try to take this risk yourself, whether that's, literally a lemonade stand, starting a business, right? It's possible that your kid starts a lemonade stand and sells nothing, and that would be really sad. And I feel for the kid who does the work to set up a lemonade stand and doesn't sell any lemonade, and that's sad. But they're not, if as a child doing that and experiencing that, that's a lesson that they can take with them. Whereas if they were in their 20s or 30s and tried to start a business and they had a family to support and a mortgage to pay, it's going to be a lot worse for your business to fail than if you're 9 years old and your lemonade stand doesn't do too well, right? So be there to support them. That's where kids are going to have the most effective learning. And the last piece here is goal setting, and let your kid participate with the goal setting. So let them feel like they're contributing to the success of a family, right? The whole family unit. That's going to work for your relationship, your interpersonal relationship, and their relationships with money and their relationships throughout life. They're going to be able to be more successful over time. So these are my main 4 points I hope that everyone takes away from this presentation. So with that, wrapping up, I'm going to say some future workshops that the Butte County Library REACH program will be putting on will be on estate planning and insurance and some advanced investing topics that we will cover as well. So estate planning is wills, taxes, trusts, things that we talk about at the maybe later end of our lives. Insurance is things that we need throughout our lives. Home, auto, renter's insurance, we'll cover those. And then some more advanced investing for things like retirement accounts or personal, just investing, taxable accounts and other kinds of savings. And we'll talk about those in the future. So with that, I thank you all for listening and being here. And there we go. I hope you have a great weekend, and I will see you at the next workshop.